Joyce, having an extensive musical background, was able to skillfully use music and song for purposes of symbolism and characterisation in Dubliners. I Dreamt I Dwelt in Marble Halls alludes to the character of Eveline and her sense of longing and dreaming. Eveline has no life, and love is secondary.
She always had an edge in her, especially when other people were listening. Miss Hill, don't you see that had given her the palpitations. When she was growing up, he had never gone for her because she was a girl. But latterly he had begun to threaten her and tell her what he would do to her, if only for her dead mother's sake. And now she had nobody to protect her. Ernest was dead, and Harry, who worked in the church decorating business, was nearly always somewhere down the country. And besides, the invariable squabble for money on a Saturday night had just begun to weary her unspeakably. She always gave her entire wages, 7 shillings, and Harry sent her what he could. But the trouble was to get any money from her father. He said she used to squander the money, that she had no head, that he wasn't going to give her his hard-earned money to throw about the streets. And much more, for he was usually fairly bad on Saturday night. In the end, he'd give her the money and ask her had she no intention of going out to buy Sunday's dinner. So she'd have to rush out and do her marketing, returning late under her load of provisions. It was hard work to keep that house together, a hard life. But she was about to explore another life with Frank. Frank was very kind, manly, open-hearted. She was to go away with him by the night boat to be his wife and live with him in Buenos Aires, where he had a home waiting for her. Oh, how well she remembered the first time she had seen him. His peaked cap pushed back on his head, and his hair tumbled forward over a face of bronze. And then they'd come to know one another. He used to wait for her every evening outside the stores and see her home. People knew they were courting. At first it had been an excitement for her to have a fellow, and then she began to like him. He had started out as a deck boy, and he'd sailed through the Straits of Magellan. He told her all the names of the ships he had been on. He had landed on his feet in Buenos Aires and came home to the old country just for a holiday. Of course, her father found out about the affair and forbade her to have anything to say to him. One day he quarrelled with Frank, and after that she had to meet her lover in secret. The white of 2 letters in her lap grew indistinct. One was to Harry, and the other was to her father. Her father was becoming old lately, she noticed. He would miss her. Her time was running out, but she continued to sit there. Down far in the avenue, she could hear an organ playing. She knew the air. How strange it should come that very night to remind her of her promise to her mother. Her promise to keep the home together as long as she could. She remembered the last night of her mother's illness. As she mused the pitiful vision of her mother's life, that life of commonplace sacrifices closing in final craziness. She trembled as she heard her mother's voice. She stood up in a sudden impulse of terror. Escape! She must escape. Frank would save her. He would give her life, and perhaps love too. But she wanted to live. Why should she be unhappy? She had a right to happiness. Frank would take her in his arms, and he would save her. She stood among the swaying crowd at the station at the North Wall. He held her hand, and she knew he was speaking to her, saying something about the passage over and over again. She caught a glimpse of the black mass of the boat lying in beside the quay wall. She felt her cheek pale and cold, and she prayed to God to direct her, to show her what was her duty. If she went, tomorrow she'd be on the sea with Frank, steaming towards Buenos Aires. Her passage had been booked. Could she still draw back after all he had done for her? She felt him seize her hand. Come! All the seas of the world tumbled about her heart. He was drawing her into them. He would drown her. She gripped with both hands at the iron railing. Come! No! He rushed beyond the barrier and he called to her to follow. He was shouted at to go on, but he still called to her. She set her white face to him, passive like a helpless animal. Her eyes gave him no sign of love, or farewell, or recognition.